is physical wealth.
Hello, hello, hello. Today is November 13th, 2023. Um, Today I'm going to be talking about interpretations and formal logic. This discussion is free and it's interactive, so I'm reading these comments, so I'm giving people time to get in, so you can comment, but I want you to interact so we can have, a conversation, a discussion. If you haven't seen the previous episodes yet, please check those out, and because each episode relates to the other to build a foundation for critical thinking, understanding, and improve mental health. So you got to see those episodes so you're not lost about some of the stuff I may say that's relative to something I said already. That's the best part about YouTube. You only have to say it once. After that, just go back and watch those episodes where I said it already. See how that works? That works out really well, doesn't it? Okay, anyway, this is the Adroit Living session on the Erudition Network. Here, I like to volunteer this time to interact online, free of charge, to provide a holistic, guided perspective towards mental health and physical wealth by linking subjective and objective perspectives via science and faith to aid well-rounded knowledge and positive mental health. You see, science is the method humans use to tangibly make sense of things, and faith is the innate part in humanity that compels people to discern and act spontaneously as they do, and to be creative as well as compassionate. So, that discernment, it all depends on perspective, how you think something is. So the subjective perspective means your opinion is based on what you feel, how you believe something is, and interpreting that for yourself. And the objective perspective means you basing things on facts, and it's unchanging facts. So it's not going to alter regardless of your perception. Hey, Sean Anthony, stay tuned, and ask any questions you want to ask. I'm going to answer questions today. So the objective perspective doesn't change, meaning there's facts and factors of facts such as God and the factual evidence thereof. A lot of people have a lot of evidence that, makes everyone to able to see that there is a fact, that there is a creator outside of, just ourselves. One of the main points the Adroit Living interactive live stream has always been to show how mental health is physical wealth. And each episode is a different contribution towards such effort. I appreciate your feedback and comments, but most importantly, I appreciate your attention to my unique approach of mental health being physical wealth. It can be extremely stressful and difficult to help people with mental health, but pray God give it to you because God fills the gaps. Sometimes the topics can be a little tricky, so I encourage everyone to watch to the end. A lot of times the topics are concerning things that's going on in our current economy. So those tricky topics can, sometimes have some issues. As like, I didn't understand quite, what you said there. Then you watch the end, you're like, but it unfolded as I got closer to the end of my time. So I've challenged viewers to watch each episode 3 times each, and each time having a different perspective to assist with mental health, critical thinking skills, memory, and understanding, just to name a few benefits from watching the same episode so many times, because like I said, it is tricky sometimes. And your perspective may change after you've seen it once or twice, all the way through to the end. So I encourage you to go ahead and watch it at least twice. So you'll say, oh, okay, I thought you were saying something else. And then I watched it again. And yeah, now I get it. I get it. Hey, it happens. It happens. But today's topic is interpretations and formal logic. Previous episodes, I mentioned about formal logic. Formal logic is something that scientists and philosophers have identified and recognized centuries ago. But a lot of times now we are steering away from formal logic because there's formal education. However, as the pandemic happened, a lot of people were like, well, we're really concerned because we can't go to have the formal education. But the matter of the fact is, you still have formal logic. Now, the formal logic is you don't need anybody to teach you that. This is something that your innate discernment, when God created your DNA, He gave you this thing called discernment. This gift of discernment allows you to understand in a formal logic, despite what's happening outwardly or what kind of education you have and things of that nature. It doesn't matter that, oh, I didn't graduate from that class. Yeah, that school of thought right there. That's too much psychology for me. I didn't graduate with that. But you will start to see that a lot of the things that are psychology based are really more about life and life skills and the things that you do every day. So more of that is you understanding or identifying and putting a label on those things that happen every day so you can understand it better. So it's really not, about, oh, well, I didn't understand that. Don't worry, because I'll break it down for you. And we have these comments so you can jump in at any point in time and say, hey, and ask whatever question you want to ask. So there's times in different episodes where I mentioned that books of faith are really more books that show us a history. It also shows us, different things that bring about a logic to things. You don't have to have a formal education in order to have, this understanding in these books. So I mentioned that books of faith are an advanced form of history and critical thinking books. The only thing is, readers are not compelled to have a formal education or use a formal grammar to have a formal logical foundation to build knowledge and wealth and increase faith. And that's why, in so many cases, those books of faith transcend time and generations, as well as education and culture. All the various barriers that we kind of put and is innate in the system, the structures, the set of systems that we adhere to every day, like when we go to school, brick and mortar, or whatever, online school, whatever, set structures. That's why I like homeschool, because homeschool is not necessarily a set structure more than it is addressing the whole man in a formal logic sense. So that's definitely something that you might want to think about, because homeschoolers are extremely intelligent, and a lot of people, they just can't get enough of homeschoolers, and this might be why. That's one of the keys there. Hey, Daddy Lee and Mama Charlotte, how y'all doing? Oh, they said hi, Eddie. Now, Daddy Lee, I know you and Mama Charlotte understand formal logic, because it's like, back when you all were coming up, they didn't have like this, where you said, oh, you gotta go to high school and graduate, you gotta go, or somebody's gonna knock on the door and, you know, they want to know why you're not there, and then they're gonna try to, embarrass your parents and maybe even lock them up. Back then, you went or you didn't. It wasn't, mandatory that the government would get involved, just like it wasn't mandatory that the government would get involved if you decide that you want to add a little bit of corporal punishment, not, go overboard like a lot of these people are saying is happening now. But a little bit of corporal punishment where your children aren't listening, it's a formal logic to understand that, yeah, this kid isn't acting right. You're not quite getting it, so I'm going to pop you on the butt and tell you to go on your way. Give a little swat on the hand with your hand on their butt and tell them to go on their way. But a lot of people, they get a little bit overboard with it, so it's kind of going away because people don't have the exercise of formal logic. Everybody wants somebody to, tell them verbatim, this is what you do, this is how you do this, and this is how you, and that just doesn't happen. So, the Bible, for example, it showed that this story where some people were observing how two people were sowing their tithes, and the tithes is like the 10% of their earnings However, one person earned more than the other person, so they were able to tithe more than the person who earned less. However, when it came to reap the rewards of sowing this 10%, the person who had less to give was rewarded more than the person who had more to give. They both sold 10%. One of them sold less because they didn't have much, but it was the matter of the formal logic of it. This person who sowed seeds, even though they didn't have much to give, it was more of a sacrifice. So the whole 10% thing may not necessarily hit you the same way that it'll hit somebody else when it comes to understanding it. From what it seems more like is the sacrifice of obedience and following what is said to be expected in order for you to sow seeds properly. And it's like, you're reciprocating in a way. So you're like, well, if I have this, then I can give this much without having to go completely in detriment to my own personal well-being. Some people don't have it like that. Some people go well above and beyond what they are really capable of just so they can show their due diligence in being invested in something. Some people say if you invested in something financially, then you are really invested in it, as opposed to saying, "Oh yeah, I'm on board with you," but when it comes down to financially investing in it, you know where to be found. It's like, I thought you said you were on board. Yeah, I'm on board. I'm on board. I got you. I'm supporting you. Okay. Well, I need the finances in order to take this further. So you have to sow financially into it in order to exhibit that you actually on board. A lot of things get lost in interpretations, but there's a formal logic there that helps fill the gaps that says, hey, you said you're doing one thing, but you're really doing the other from everything I can conclude outside of what you're just saying. So sowing those seeds may seem like that story was like all about paying tithes. It was not all about paying tithes. It was about how you are sowing and reaping what you sow. So it's like, somebody will look at someone and say, who hurt you? And they're doing that because they're like, the actions that that person is exhibiting shows that somebody hurt you along the way. Like, you got trust issues. You don't trust nobody. Like, some people will say, well, you've been in a million relationships this year alone and you still single. Who hurt you? What's wrong with you? And it's like, they can say they're not hurt, but when their actions are exhibiting that, wow, you clearly don't trust anybody, you don't really want anybody around you. These actions are showing that, yeah, at some point in time, this person was hurt. So it's interpretation of, yes, that's what your mouth said, but there's a formal logic that's more in alignment with perhaps you didn't tell it all. Okay. And don't think that just because somebody hurt you and the allowance made it seem as if you were blindsided. A lot of times people get hurt and they were not blindsided. It's just, timing. Timing is everything, especially when you have the formal logic to understand that everything has a season. And every time that a season change, as you allow certain things to happen so that when the season changes again, you can benefit more. So it's not to say that people who are hurt by others were blindsided by the fact that they would be hurt by those people. Sometimes, being nice, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's no boundaries or no reciprocation. People can think, oh, well, you're so nice, and I really appreciate how nice you are all the time. You always seem to smile. Like, Chilly Willy, that's an old school cartoon. He always seems to smile, no matter what. However, it seems like you could take advantage of people because they're being nice. The matter of the fact is, again, timing. And being nice doesn't mean that they won't reciprocate exactly what you're sowing to them. So if you think, oh, okay, well, that person is too nice to reciprocate these evil actions that I'm doing, that's a misinterpretation. And it's not necessarily accurate, because a lot of times you could be nice, but you can give as good as you receive. And that's how a lot of people end up, getting hurt by someone that they thought didn't understand that they were um, in a situation where they were being taken advantage of, as opposed to, you know, oh, you're nice and I'm just gonna, it's okay, we all gonna get along. No, yep, some people. Oh, that's nice. I'm sorry you're tired though, but I appreciate you watching. You know, in the previous show, I stated, you know, um, how people always ask when they look at the current events, and they're saying, well, Israel is fighting, Palestine is fighting, and these wars and rumors of wars. Why is God allowing these things to happen? And then you have to think about it. Somebody hurt God. God wants us all to know how that feels and what to do in response to those things. And we're always being watched and tracked for the things that we're doing, even though we are hurt. So even in your hurt, you should not respond spontaneously and lash out and reciprocate what's happening to you. Take a step back. Think critically about it, because the interpretation that comes out may be different than what you intended. For example, if I say, okay, these are some problems. This is a problem, this is a problem, that's a problem. And now you have all these problems that you said before someone to say, hey, I like to fix those problems because these problems don't have to exist. Somebody can say, oh, well, I interpreted your complaining as opposed to you informing them of things that's wrong. I interpret your complaining as you're being disgruntled. You're angry. You're perpetuating stereotypes of magnum proportions. So we're just not going to listen to you. So that doesn't necessarily help, improve things unless you're persistent. Because a lot of times the interpretations that people are receiving from what you're saying, it's got to pass a lot of barriers. It's got to pass the fact that the barrier that people have been hurt. It's got to pass the barrier of the stereotypes that people perpetuate. It's got to pass the barrier of, well, this isn't working, and there's no hope, and this haplessness, and the defeatist spirit of the barriers that's blocking formal logic. A lot of times people do not resort to formal logic because there's no education that supports formal logic outside of books of faith and critical thinking books, which makes it really difficult for people to understand that, hey, if you'd have put just a little bit more thought into it, maybe you wouldn't be in this situation. A lot of times, if schools or churches or things like that would combine their efforts to say, hey, this is both. And you do have that in some cases. It's private school, but it's not on a general public school platform, so you don't see it as often. But a lot of times you see it in private schools where they're combining education and faith a lot. However, it is a little room for creativity and venturing off to be your own person, because there's these sanctions and this that they call orthodox, and you have to follow this set of systems, even though we understand that those set of systems are broken systems. But it's like it's a wheel that's been created and it's tethered and worn, and you ever have like a car, you love this car, you wash this car inside out, you polish it, you even go so far as to wax the pedals for the gas and the brakes. Yes, I did that. I know, right? That was crazy. I didn't know. I'm just trying to clean everything up, and I'm like, because I had somewhere to go, and I was like, I was young. I was really young, and I had somewhere to go, and I was like, inside and out. Let me clean this up. At least I didn't take a water hose to the inside and start spraying the inside trying to clean stuff. But I'm just saying, you get so detail oriented that you're not exercising critical thinking skills because your interpretation is just a little bit far left. So it's not to say that, thankfully, waxing the gas and the brake pedals did not result in an accident, but it was still the matter of the fact that that was very dangerous. So you cannot be so wrapped up in what you think is the interpretation more so than you are applying formal logic so that you can understand holistically that while this may look like a good idea, it's probably not. You may have the interpretation wrong. And that's something that you have to consider, even, outside of trying to blame anybody. It's just a matter of the fact you got to reevaluate some things. So in the interpretation, shouldn't share. I never wax space. Some things I shouldn't share. Well, I just put it out there. But I know, right? Because yeah, it is funny at the same time of somebody who doesn't know, they interpret cleaning and they get into the details of, okay, I gotta clean this too because this is inside the car. So you clean it, but you have a misinterpretation and misunderstanding of what it is. So you gotta exercise a bit more formal logic so that you can stay safe. A lot of these episodes are encouraging people to exercise formal logic because you need to stay safe. And we all need to stay safe. So we need more people to exercise formal logic as opposed to knowing the problems exist, knowing the set of broken systems exist, and never doing anything to fix it because, oh, well, you know, when you complain to companies and organizations, firms, whether they're global, local, or whatever, you know, fly by night, like the Spirit Halloween, they have a magnificent business model. It's just ridiculous. Um, I have to applaud it because they don't even pay into the broken systems. They saw the broken set of systems, the business plans, and the business models, and they said, look, we're going to just come in with something totally different so we don't have these problems. That's critical thinking at its best. What they did was they saw that businesses have a brick and mortar establishment, but that's not working for them as much as it would if they would just set it up virtually, is what a lot of places are doing. But what they have done, they set it up so it's only seasonal. So they set the stores up in establishments that are already there so they don't have to pay into a building in order to keep their business going tangibly, physically, right there so you can have the products that you purchase right there and right there. So that's a business model that is trending. But a lot of people are starting to see, oh wow, so that's why we should do it online. That's why we should conduct business virtually. Because we're going to be able to profit more than we would if we were paying for a brick and mortar establishment. So see, you see the problems, you see the set of broken systems, and you interpret it as this is what I can do to fix these problems, as opposed to, well, that's the way it is. We just got to follow it. And, when somebody comes up and sues us, it's okay because we have what's called this safety net, this security net, so that when people sue us, well, we just reach into that and pay them out of that. That is a terrible business model. Some people know that. So Fortune 100 companies, Fortune 500 companies and stuff like that, they think about the systems and they say, okay, we'll save up this security net of money so that if somebody wants to sue us, we can pay for it. But after a while, what they came to understand is if they encourage people to behave accordingly to avoid those liabilities, they would profit more, and they would use the fact that they did not get into any legal problems. They would use that money then to reward the people. So now that money that would have went to somebody, whoever it was that sued, is now going to be distributed amongst the people, the employees, maybe even spread to the customers. You never know. But it's also going to go to the managers and the CEOs, the investors and stockholders, shareholders. And that's the reason why that business model is called a Fortune 500, Fortune 100. So you got to see that they already saw the problems. They didn't ignore the problems like a lot of up and coming companies who may not have the experience, or pre-existing companies who see the problems, but they figure they don't want to invest the money to resolve the problems. So that is one of the other factors, I suppose, that will prevent people from using, um, formal logic that's seen in these business models and applying it in their situation. However, um, we can see that a lot of people are like, yeah, I see that is happening. And, these too big to fail companies are going out of business as a result of that happening. So what do we do? Now, we saw how Toys R Us went out of business. They had to close their brick and mortar establishments and then piggyback on pre-existing companies who say, oh, okay, we interpreted the fact that we're not making enough money to maintain our own brick and mortar establishment as we need to upgrade. So we're going to take a step back and piggyback off of other well-established companies that's also sitting there doing the same struggles that they were doing, and they're going to get back on their feet financially, and then they're going to offer those same things that they passed up on because they didn't have the formal logic application to the inevitable changes. Change is inevitable. You cannot stop it. However, you can misinterpret it if you're not also applying formal logic. Now, the formal logic states if change is inevitable, you need to stay one step ahead at least and project these things out. For example, now that Toys R Us, I'm using Toys R Us because it's the safest example to use, but there's other things. But follow this logic. So Toys R Us said, okay, we're going to take a step back, fix all the problems that were existing during the time that we encountered this epic problem that made us close all of our stores. We're going to take a step back, observe everything, figure out what went wrong, how it went wrong, and how we can fix it so that when we get back on our feet and start to have these brick and mortar establishments that are just our separate entity as opposed to piggybacking on a pre-existing business and selling our products under their umbrella, we'll be able to maintain and sustain that wealth to the point where our investors, stockholders, shareholders will continue to invest in our organization. A lot of people are still stuck on well, we don't want to change in that way. So they sabotage things. So that it seems as if that's not going to be a viable source of progression. However, many years ago, when Dr. John introduced computers to the world, he had an idea that this is going to be so epic it's going to be like a whole new world. Back then, it was so fantastic of an idea that people interpreted it as sci-fi. A lot of people who love sci-fi, you know, because you saw the progression of how they took computers, which was some crazy idea, and they made this movie called Weird Science, where it implemented a lot of the different ideas in an advanced form, as well as entertaining, where the woman pops out of the computer or whatever, beautiful woman, and the young kid who's, you know, a nerd, and he's like into all of this computer stuff that people at that time didn't think were going to go anywhere because the advancement of technology was so slow. The phone was like the replacement of Pony Express, and the Pony Express that derived from people who actually, you know, word of mouth and only being in the vicinity so that you could talk to the person face to face. And it was like, well, I'll take that message over to the next town over by horse. And then it continued to progress from there, from Pony Express to actual telephones. People didn't like telephones. They was like, oh, this is not this is unholy. Back when everybody thought about, the first thing they thought about was interpreting things as godly or not godly. There was no formal logic there that stated this progression, because a change is inevitable. This progression was actually something that may be what God wants. He gave the person the thought to be able to implement these improvements. So why is it that it either has to be holy or unholy? But anyway, people moved beyond that. Phones weren't weren't holy, and they moved to radios. Then radios came into play, and people were like really fascinated with the radio because it made your imagination just spark, your brain synapses just pop, firing off all kind of thoughts, and your level of creativity boosted by epic proportions as a result of each advancement. So when someone said, well, let's put a screen so people can see what we're saying, because they noticed that the interpretations were off. Some people imagined different things, but it wasn't exactly what the person who was communicating the information wanted the receivers of the information to see or to think and how to feel. So they wanted to put a screen to it. Now, this screen provided a visual. So now more people were more in alignment with what the information was trying to convey. However, it did cut down a great deal on creativity, because now people can see, like, oh, I thought it was something else. That's that's a little bit more boring than what I had imagined. I'm gonna go back to reading my books and listening to the radio. So anyway, plus the television went from, being called the idiot to like, oh, there's nothing on there. It's so stupid. It's not even what I imagined it would be, or what I interpreted from the voices that were on the radio. Now I'm totally disappointed, because this person is definitely a radio personality, because they don't look the part. I thought, my fantasy was that this voice was so magnificent that I painted a picture of who this person was and what they looked like. And now I'm disappointed now that you put a screen to it. So they moved from thinking that the television was the idiot tube to now being the boob tube, because now you had people who watching TV just so they could put pretty faces on, because people didn't want to watch television if the person was not appealing. So they then called it the boob tube. So now you have all this sex going on the television, and everybody's watching because they want to see the sex on the TV. So then it went from being called the boob tube to being called, educational, because now you have different types of entertainment showing on the television, where you have people who are saying, oh, okay, I saw it evolve from being called the idiot tube to being called the boob tube, to now being called something that we can use for educational purposes. And that's really when the platforms of everything in technology advances so drastically that it is extremely profitable, to the point where it creates a generational wealth. And this generational wealth stems from the fact that your customer base will never end. Your customer base will never end, because this is the change that was inevitable and was spoken about. And as you continue to see the problems and fix the problems instead of feed into the problems, now you have something that everybody wants, because it's no longer just perpetuating problems, it's resolving problems. So the television evolved from the telephone, or word of mouth, Pony Express, whatever you want to call it, mail, mailing letters. It evolved from that because there was a never ending customer base, and that customer base at its roots was communication. Now, what we can see more often than not is the evolution of communication has now evolved to entertainment. We all want to be entertained. And this is a method of entertainment. However, we also need, there's a foundational need that people have to learn. They have to learn and grow. These evolutions have been made to the point now where we see a computer in everyone's hands, even though at first IBM was the only one that could afford it because it was so expensive to create that stuff, and expensive to make sure that it was well kept and it wasn't being misused, so it wouldn't break. But it still had to improve, evolve. And as it evolved, later it became more affordable to the general public, just like education. Education has evolved and it's become more accessible to the general public. Previously, people were farmers, right? And that was their source of income. That was their source of work. They had to farm in order to work, in order to have a product that was tradable for money so that they can live, to pay bills, purchase things that they need, necessities. So they noticed that, well, these farmers, they don't exactly have a collaborative formal education. So let's create a place where they can be formally educated and everyone can possess pretty much the same information. That's why now you have different classes like English classes, math classes, history classes, but we won't talk about history classes. However, is something that is at the foundation of education. So when they decided, okay, we're going to get a collaborative effort of education so that people can be more on one accord, so they can see the same things that we want them to see. Just like I told you about the radio and how the radio progressed to the visual screen of the television, and then led inevitably to the computer, and the computer led to the phone, the cell phones, where you have a screen, because it went through the same evolution as the television, radio, and word of mouth. So the phone at first, it was just word of mouth. The cell phone came, again, word of mouth. The screen was not there, so there was this visual perception that was lacking. While it boosted imagination, it still disappointed with reality. So they developed the screen for the cell phone. So now the cell phone can do everything that the evolution of the television and the evolution of computers have now evolved to do. This level of progression is necessary to note because of where we are now. We're now in the digital age. Now, the digital age allows so many fantastic, unimaginable things to transpire that at once, when the development of the computers first came out, the person couldn't even imagine that it would have gotten this far, where now we have these holograms and things like that and projector screens and, things like that. And it's like, wow, you could have never imagined that it would progress this far. Just like a lot of the times we see how schools are evolving and improving in a great deal of times. We can see the progression as it is, but we couldn't predict it and see the bigger picture back when, we were patronizing the systems. Even though the set of systems are broken, we can still see that there's something there if we can fix it. If we could put our finger on it to improve it, we can fix it. Just like they thought about the method of communications and entertainment. It improved because you have to look at the problems and don't just pay somebody off because, oh, well, yeah, here's some money, shut up, get out of the way. That's not helping. It's helping the person. And maybe even their family members, all depend on how much money they get after the fact. But the matter of the fact is, it's not advancing us as an economy, let alone as a global economy. Oftentimes, it's actually hurting us because now this this lack of asymmetry in information, meaning somebody has more information than the other one, and that lack is causing a great deal of mental health concerns, which is impacting us globally. Because at one point, you saw how people, they go postal, and it was it was like local. It wasn't so widespread, and it was, a lot of times predictable of who's going to go postal and where it's going to happen. And nowadays you cannot predict that because people, you know, they leveled up. They're like, well, you're probably going to predict I would do this, so I'm going to be more spontaneous and I'm going to act crazy somewhere else. Not to say, um, you know, perhaps I shouldn't have said that, but a lot of times people consider your spontaneous your spontaneous behavior that is unpredictable, illogical, and irrational, and there's no connections. There's no way to make the connections. They consider that to be crazy. So that's why I said it that way, because that's a lot more times of what is being seen. However, a lot of people really think that they're more strategic, clever, witty. So they do those type of spontaneous behaviors just to throw you off so you cannot predict or stop them. But anyway, there's an interpretation there that they understand, and they're applying formal logic to it to say, okay, this is what you think. All right, I'm going to be completely outside of anything you could ever imagine, and I'm going to do this. Surprise! No one would have ever saw it coming. That's what's happening a lot of times because, again, we don't know what people are thinking when we're putting information out there because they don't have that visual and that formal logic along with the formal education, because formal education and formal logic are two totally different things, and we're not really addressing that in a lot of cases, but hopefully I'll help improve that. However, for now, let's get back to how the evolution has come so I can get to my other point. So the interpretations of all these advancements of the phone, the TV, and now the cell phone, which is both. Is wait, we forgot the computer, which is all three of them. So the cell phone is now the radio, it's the television, it's the computer, and it's the telephone. It's everything you can imagine all in the palm of your hand, and they made it affordable so everyone can access it. Now, I don't know if you remember when everybody's phone was pinged to show Everybody is upgraded to the phone, so everybody can be tracked. Everybody can the phone, I should say, every phone can be tracked. So if there's an emergency, weather, there's some sort of a shooter, um, the phone could be pinged to say, "Hey, this is happening in your area. Be careful." And that, in a large way, is great. And in some ways, maybe not so much, because now you don't have privacy if you have your phone with you. So a lot of people aren't really comfortable with that because it interprets to them as a way to track them. However, if we were to put a better understanding on it, like putting the screen to the radio, you'd be able to see a bigger picture, which would be more unified understanding, as opposed to you have your understanding and I have mine, and each individual has their own understanding of what's being what information is being conveyed. So each interpretation is different, and it puts the individual's formal logic to it. So you never know what's going to happen. Hey, Eric, it's nice to see you. So a lot of times people think, you know, formal logic isn't something that we should encourage people to have. However, it is because those anomalies of formal thought thinkers that go out here and do some fantastic advancements to society that we couldn't even have imagined would ever exist, let alone be so epic now. I said that to say that brick and mortar schools have now changed over to online schools and virtual digital schooling, or whatever you want to call it. It's now advanced to the point where the computers are more involved than what they have ever been before. No one really could have predicted that when the computers were allowed to go out into public schools back in the 80s. And it's like, why did you make it accessible to public school kids? Public school kids are more at risk than anybody else. Why would you do that? But it was necessary in order for it to elevate to the level that it has now. You know, sometimes in our journey, we think we've interpreted the logic of our actions. Then the shift occurs. I'm sure back when Bill Gates joined the whole computer idea, he was thinking, "Oh, you know what? I'm gonna be in on something that's gonna change the world." But he never knew how much it was gonna change the world. Now he gets to go flying out into space. Never thought he'd be able to do that, right? Because it was inconceivable. You can't predict that kind of generational wealth, to the point where you have money that you can literally burn up and fuel going to outer space on a personal trip. Imagine that. Imagine that. Now, it started small. It started with the evolution of something that existed already, but a collaborative effort was made so that it could advance. And that's what's happening with the schools. Schools have adopted a great deal of business models that derive from a set of broken systems. This set of broken systems has perpetuated a mindset that mental health isn't valued above financial gain. We're starting to change that now, because it's it's gotten to the point where no one is safe. You can't go anywhere. You can't go to the theater. You can't go grocery shopping. You can't go anywhere, to include sleep in your home, because people are shooting and the bullets are going through the walls. They're going through everything. So it's illogical to allow this menacing mindset to be perpetuated any further. So there's going to come a time where the formal education is going to show in the brick and mortar schools that while they adopted these set of broken systems, it's got to change. It's got to change to something that's more helpful to improve global mental health. And in doing so, we're going to see a lot more of these digital footprints that are showing where information is derived from. So there's not going to be much covering up of who did what, when, where, and why. You know, I suppose the why would be a little bit more left up into, um, a formal logic where people have to just gather and conclude their own understanding. However, what we can see is a lot of people are making moves because they think they can't be tracked. A lot of people are thinking, oh, well, no one's going to know what I did. However, we're seeing with the January 6th people, digital, your digital footprint is telling on you. Whereas at one point you thought, well, nobody's going to know, nobody's going to see, nobody's going to be able to track it back to me, but it is able to be tracked back to you, your IP address, which is your basically your address and your location in a digital sense. Just like we see a map, and the map has these longitude, latitude numbers, so it can pinpoint a location regardless of what the name changes to. The name of that location changes to. The same thing is said for the computer. And it's so fascinating if you really think about it, because it's imitating life. It's imitating what we already know about life and how to locate people in like real world situations. But it's now digital, which is amazing. Because you have people who were like overseas and they were thinking, well, nobody's going to know it's me making these prank phone calls. But yeah, you were able to be tracked. Just like now, people think, oh, well, these computer scams, nobody can track me. Yeah, you can be tracked. Now, it's not to say that, all the world's a hacker, but it's to say that all of everyone who has any kind of time with computers, they're going to use that to track some things. And it's not necessarily that they were trying to be formally educated in that particular area, more so than this is just, what we do now. This is how we move. This is how we communicate. This is how we have entertainment. This is how we are educated. Brick and mortar schools, I'm not saying that they will no longer exist, but I'm saying this digital online source of education is far more profitable than a lot of people may have originally thought, and it's far more likely that it will excel beyond imagination as people continue to progress and interpret things the way it should be using formal logic. Now, the formal logic states that if you were watching and you saw how some people thought that nobody could find them because they're making prank phone calls, they'll call the restaurant and say, make an order to their neighbor, and then they thought, oh, nobody's ever going to know that I'm the one who made that prank phone call, and now my neighbor got to pay for about 10 pieces. They know. They were able to track it. The same thing is for, your digital footprint and the things that you think you're doing digitally. People are going to be able to track it. Now, my hope is that people can track not just the people who are doing harmful things, but people who are doing things that's good, that's for the good, for the advancement of positive, energy, positive creativity, positive education, positive means that are also lucrative and have more sustainability than anything else, because everybody wants something that's positive, and people are going to invest in those positive things, those positive progressions, because it's logical. And when you have a never-ending base of customer base, you have a product. It's because you have a product that everybody wants, and everybody wants to see it advance. So it's going to be able to be tracked who did what, when, where, and what happened to it. So it's better for, in my opinion, it's better for someone to exhibit or be tracked that they have been a positive contribution to the positive advancement of things, as opposed to tearing things down. It's written in the Bible that a good woman builds her home, a bad one tears it down. And if we think about it, this is our home that we're either building or tearing down. I wouldn't want to be on the side where I was found that I was taking things and tearing it down. Actually, I have a digital footprint that shows that I've actually positively contributed to the advancement of online schools, um, like K-12 online schools, to include higher learning online schools. That digital footprint speaks to your character both online and offline. So when the megaverse, as I think they're calling the internet world now, when your footprint is showing who you are, you want it to be identified as something positive, desirable, and something that's going to create generational wealth. And if you can't create generational wealth, just don't tear it down. That's all. However, any small contribution helps. So it's like, okay, I had a thought, and that thought builded up on another thought, which build up on another thought. So now somebody puts these two pictures together, and now you have this idea. Wow, this is going to be helpful to a whole, because now you have this business practice that's gone global, and you have this other mindset of training that's also gone global. Now you put both of those together, and now you have something that's not only extremely lucrative, but logical. It was the logical way everything was going in the first place. Now, I'm almost out of time, so I'm going to have to try to make this connection now so you can watch the next episode to see where I'm going with this. Again, watch the previous episodes because these build up on each other. So, after seeing the advancements and the logical trends in evolving, a development is still developing. But as you can see, what's happening is there's a one world type of order, and it's going off with this digital footprint, because this digital world, or whatever you want to call it, is global. And this is the way that everybody is being reached and connected. And that's why people were pinging your phone to see, did it work? Did it work? They're testing the atmosphere to see, did it work? Did it work? It's that call out and that response back idea. But anyway, one of the methods that we're seeing is online schools. Now, especially after the pandemic, when online schools had such a drastic increase that people had to just right away develop online schools out of the blue, because people needed it as a source of training and continuing education. Whereas one point, people were sabotaging the idea because they did not want people to use the computer for that, just like they sabotaged the television because they didn't want it to advance. They wanted the radios. They were so accustomed to the radios. And then people who, the generation before that, didn't want the radio to advance, so they sabotaged that. And, this is just a repetitive cycle of progression. So we see what's going to happen. The question is, can you be tracked helping the problem, as opposed to just getting what you can for yourself, because you're going to take that money that everybody stored away for you to sue them and take your money and run and go invest in something else, the things that's coming up next. A lot of people, clever people, would do that because, like I said in previous episodes, kings and queens in Pond's clothing are people who are knowledgeable about these things, can see the bigger picture, but opt out to do anything about it because nobody wants their mental health played with when they're saying, well, and as a result, they're saying, well, it's not worth it. Let them have it. I don't care. I'm moving on to the next thing. That's one of the major contributing factors that makes it difficult for the global mental health to show that we're safe. So that's my main purpose and my goal in these episodes, to help us get back to a safe place so it can be more lucrative. You can't have money when people are not alive. So you have to help with these little intricacies while you're also building the other thing that I'm going to show you in the next episode. So if you don't know, I try to come on an hour before this very moment. Is now 7 o'clock in some places, 6 o'clock in others, whatever time it is for you and you watching this live today. I come on an hour before this. Try to be here on time so you can get into the comments and ask questions, and we can get to the topics a little bit faster. Until then, remember, mental health is physical wealth.